Stories are telltale signs. My name is Osadumebi, and every week I will tell you a short story written by a Nigerian writer or author. That's the long and short of it. So without much ado, this week's story is by Stella Inabo, and it's titled Midnight Ebba. At exactly 1 a.m. on Monday night, the light in the kitchen at number 2 Folaye Estate came on. You might be wondering why a grown man would be tiptoeing around his own kitchen, setting out a pot and the container holding Ijebu garri. Dapo had crept out of the bed he shared with Sophie. They had slept with their backs touching the pillow separating them. The pillow was not the only barrier that had formed between them. Dapo did not think about the fact that he had not spoken to his wife when he got home from work that night. He refused to acknowledge the absence of food at dinner time. He had watched TV with the sullen face of a 3-year-old, and his stomach had growled with the ferociousness of a wild animal in the forest. Sophie had gone to bed first, the bang of the bedroom door signaling a good night's wish, if you could call it that. It also meant he was not invited in. Dapo had started sleeping in the parlor, but on this night, mosquitoes had chased him in. Dapo half filled the kettle with water, but before setting it to boil, he headed for the freezer. As soon as he opened it, he became laser-focused. He was looking for one thing and one thing only. If it was there, then maybe Sophie did not hate him completely. He bent over and peered into the freezer, tilting his head to the left and then to the right. Turning his body slightly, he squatted by the freezer door and used his back to keep the door open. Then he stretched out his hand and checked for the Tupperware bowl in its usual corner, but it wasn't there. He began to move every and any bowl, feeling the weight of each, giving them a little shake or taking a quick look inside. They all had leftovers, but not the eforiru he was searching for. His heart sank, and his stomach juices swirled to digest it. As he made to stand upright, the glint from a small stainless steel bowl caught his eyes. His sunken heart wrestled free from his stomach juices, and all his senses stood still as he lifted the lid of the bowl. Eforiru, with just enough meat to make his eyes water. Sophie still loved him. The soup said it all. 20 minutes later, with a stomach full of eba and soup, Dapo began to wonder if he really wanted a child. When they met, he and Sophie had agreed the world was cold and cruel, especially Nigeria, with its propensity to chew you up, spit you out, and do it all over again. It was bad enough they had to live in that world. They did not need to bring children into it. They had now been married for 2 years. A week earlier, Dapo came home and explained that he'd had a rethink. Nigeria might be bad, but they had survived, had they not? Their children would. Sophie had not replied. She got up from the couch they were sitting on, went into their bedroom with her iPad, and the silence began. 2 days into the silence, he came home to no food, and he had thought that was the beginning of the end. But you see, this Eforiro, it spoke of hope. Dapo slept better than he had in days. I married you for 2 reasons. You were the first man who did not run away when I said I did not want children. Sophie suddenly said to him the next morning. And the second reason? You don't need to know. But what I do want to know is why you want children all of a sudden. Sophie listened as Dapo told her the story of his colleague who dropped dead at work, of how fear filled his heart, of how lonely he knew he would be if he lost her, of how lonely he was sure she would be if he died, of how he wanted them to have a baby with his eyes and Sophie's temper, just in case. That is stupid, and you know it. I and our baby could die. You and our baby could die. Her voice began to rise. You don't even want to have kids for the right reasons. You're being selfish, for goodness sake. Do you know the type of world you want to bring a child into just because you don't want to handle death? This place breaks people. It almost broke you and me. Is that what you want for the baby? Dapo shrunk back in uncertainty, suddenly unsure about his change of heart. He had once been as adamant as Sophie, afraid of the endless possibilities. But this felt right. No, he was certain he wanted a child. Babe, I don't know how to explain it. I just want this. Well, I don't. Please don't talk about it again, Sophie said as she got up from their bed and headed for the bathroom. Don't talk about it till I am ready. Babe, you are pregnant, aren't you? Sophie stopped and turned around surprised. How did you know? He got up and held her gaze as he walked towards her. Kissing her, he smiled and said, The Eforiro. It spoke of hope and so much more. Stella Inabo is a writer who is traveling around Africa. To keep a roof over her head, she writes articles for technology companies. In her spare time, she writes poetry and short stories. You can read more of her work on her Substack page at Stella-Inabo and connect with her on Twitter at _ILEIGO. Details and links will be in the episode description. If you've got a story you would like to be featured on this podcast, or a published book you want to make into an audiobook, send an email to info@osadumebi.com or send me a message at Osadumebi on either Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter. I look forward to collaborating with you. And if you've enjoyed this week's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and tell a friend that stories are a good escape for a few minutes each week.